you know, when we think about yesterday, these three words pretty much, I think, sums up the conversations from yesterday. And they're these three that you see on the screen. And so collaboration, when I was walking around and listening to folks, everyone is dealing with some unbelievable challenges. And the thing that really hit me was the enthusiasm that everyone had toward facing these challenges. And I think there's so many perspectives and so many people willing to you know, take on these challenges that I think it's only going to work if we do it together. You know, I remember when we were working on the Elsevier kind of new brand language, and we're working with Kumsal, who's our CEO, and we were talking about, you know, technology, and everything's driving through technology. But as you see, we talk about advancing human progress together. We felt it was super important that we use the word human and then we do it together. And I think collaboration is the key in terms of how we're moving forward. I think yesterday with Dr. Stern, he was talking about transparency and how important transparency is, to be able to show where information is coming from. You are going to be working with partners, being very clear on how you're bringing information and technology and how you're using it. And I think the most important thing at the end is trust. And I think, you know, the conversation around how trust is at its all-time low in academia, positive thing, it's higher than the government, so we'll take that. But, you know, all kidding aside, you know, trust is everything. And I think the work that all of you are doing is looking to establish that in a world where trust is at an all-time low. So I think when I take back in terms of what we talked about yesterday, these are the three key things. So with that said, I want to kick off our next discussion, and it's actually around advancing the fourth generation university, place-based innovation and practice. We have Dr. Kurt Dombrowski. Now, Dr. Dombrowski was supposed to be here, and unfortunately he wasn't able to make it, so he's recorded his video, which I think is quite good. So you'll see him here. And then we also have from Elsevier, as a person that I have a lot of not only respect for, but she used to work in the marketing group, and she decided to take a role in our research networks team. And so it was a big loss for us, but a huge gain for the research network group. So Shruti Desai, who is leading on our fourth generation university, which is around building communities that focus on societal and economic impact through regional innovation. So I think it's going to be a great discussion. It's going to be one of those, I would call it hybrid presentations, where you have someone live and someone showing the video, but I think it'll be a great discussion. We'll have a Q&A afterwards. So Shruti, the floor is yours, and let's give a big round of applause for Shruti coming up on stage.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. I didn't pay him extra to say nice things about me, I promise. So thank you very much for not abandoning us for Coronado today and coming to hear a little bit more. We're going to explore what a fourth generation university is and what that really means in practice. This is not just about how universities are evolving, not just in a way what they produce, but the role that they play in society. I wanted to mention again, as Craig mentioned, that Kirk wasn't able to join us today live for travel disruptions. However, he has recorded a video for us where he shares how the University of Vermont is approaching this in practice. And I think you'll find it a really valuable perspective on what a 4GU looks like on the ground. But by way of introduction, Kirk is the Vice President for Research and Economic Development at the University of Vermont. That's where he leads efforts to strengthen the university's role in driving regional innovation and impact. His work focuses on connecting research, community, and industry to address real-world challenges, particularly in regions with unique economic and demographic dynamics. Through this, he's been actively exploring how universities can move beyond traditional roles to become true orchestrators of their local innovation ecosystems, making him a great example of fourth-generation university concept in practice. And as Craig mentioned, I'm leading on the fourth-generation university community engagement at Elsevier. And in my role, I work closely with universities at our global community to develop this model to connect institutions and support how they demonstrate their impact. But first, I want to tell you a little bit more about the 4GU concept before we hear from Kirk. Now, as Craig mentioned, a lot of you have talked about the challenges you face, and I don't really have to tell you necessarily about this image. You're living it on a daily basis. Those of you in the opening yesterday heard about the study that Judy talked about, the study that we did with academic leaders that found that 68% believe public trust in universities will decline in the next decade. There's a lot of pressure to demonstrate value, not just academically, but also socially, societally, and economically. But there's a gap between what universities do and how that impact is measured and communicated. And this is something that I also heard mentioned in a peer session yesterday, that they were talking about the rankings, and that the rankings aren't necessarily speaking to them, because they said if we go up in the rankings, everybody goes up in the rankings, but that's not really describing what's happening at our university. And this is actually a story that the Technical University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands, Robert Jan Smits, the former president, actually came to Elsevier and said this. He said he could see how his university was doing in the rankings, but it didn't fully capture the Eindhoven story. It didn't tell their story of impact. At its core, a fourth-generation university is one that orchestrates regional innovation ecosystems. It brings together industry, government, civil societies. You may know this as the concept of a quadruple helix, to really co-create value. This is about moving beyond knowledge transfer through really co-creation of value and about real-world impact. And importantly, this is not instead of global excellence, but it's how universities achieve global impact through regional engagement. So we did this report with TU Eindhoven, and a key part of 4GU is these developing indicators that help universities understand and demonstrate their impact. The aim, again, is not to rank universities or create a new ranking, but it's to help your university tell more complete evidence-based story of your contribution to society. And these go beyond publications and citations to include areas like partnerships, alumni impact, co-created innovation. And to understand what sets a fourth-generation university apart, we looked at the key areas or dimensions where universities can truly make an impact on their ecosystems. And this slide in particular is from the Eindhoven example. So those dimensions are ones that are steady, but the indicators that feed into that may be different. So those dimensions include education, that's talking about a gateway for talent. This is how universities attract, retain, and develop regional talent. Things like alumni stay rates and regional talent flow are some of the indicators there. There's also research. It's how you build that innovation pipeline. This again goes beyond publications into meaningful industry collaborations, joint research, and alignment with key enabling technologies that help drive regional innovation. It's also about value co-creation, or how you're turning knowledge into impact. This is how you're translating research into market-ready solutions. And key is also governance. This is how universities really take on that leadership role in their regional innovation ecosystems. Now, an important starting point when you're looking at this in your model is defining your region. That's the geographic and strategic area where your university is actively engaging in partners and focusing its efforts to drive impact. The example you can see here is the one from Eindhoven, which is so very Dutch, and I can say that because I work for a Dutch company. They set their regional innovation area as 75 kilometers, which is the area you can cycle in a day. Now, the important part about that, though, is that that is highly localized to Eindhoven's story. We were just in Shenzhen in China last week. If I took that same 75 kilometers and put that in Shenzhen, that's not going to be a drop in the ocean of their regional impact. So again, how you define that regional area is tailored to you and your university. So with the comprehensive insights from that report, we saw a need to transform those findings into an active and collaborative community committed to impact. And the mission is simple. It's just to help universities become 4GUs and drive societal and economic benefit in their region. The vision is to create a global network that shares best practices, develop indicators, and learns from each other. I like to call it a community of practice. This is a place where we're co-developing with universities and figuring out sort of the best way that we're going along this 4GU journey. Now, the community is guided by a global board of senior universities leaders. These are vice chancellors, presidents, and innovation leaders from institutions around the world. And Elsevier is a member of this community too. We support its development through data and insights and resources. I'm one of those resources. Together, the board plays a key role in shaping the concept and reviewing alignment with it. So what you can see from the board is that it's truly global, senior-led group shaping the direction of 4GU. But I want to just switch gears a little. Of course, the concept really only becomes meaningful when you see how it's applied in practice. So rather than staying at the level of framework and community, I want to move from now concept into a real-life example. Kirk's work at the University of Vermont is a great illustration of what it looks like when a university starts to actively orchestrate its regional innovation ecosystem. So let's hear from him, and again, apologies that he couldn't be here today.
I'm sorry I can't be there today. Travel issues have kept me in Vermont, but I was really excited to be invited, and I really appreciate the opportunity to present this presentation by video. I want to thank Elsevier and the team, and Shruti, my presentation partner, for the chance to go through some of the materials today that we have been working on in Vermont as they relate to the 4GU efforts broadly. I would really like to be there for the discussion and answer questions and ask questions of my own to the audience. Just not possible today, but we'll try that again next time. Creating a fourth generation university in Vermont. I want to start at the beginning just by talking a little bit about some background on Vermont and why this kind of effort makes sense here, probably for us in a way. I'm sure in many places it would, but for us this is as much a necessity as it is an opportunity. And so Vermont on the whole is small. Roughly around 648,000 people. We're old. We have a low GDP. We're a place where many people go to retire and their incomes drop. But unemployment is very low because the population is low and overall median household income is comfortable. The university reflects some of those demographic pressures. Even though we're a public university, we're roughly 80% out-of-state students. It's the highest I know of in the United States, and it really changes how we go about thinking about our job. We have about 13,000 students, and we have a large medical school. I think in the picture you can see our hospital is right actually on our campus. It's the semi-round building up in the left-hand corner. And along with the research at the university and our medical school brings in roughly $280 million in research expenditures every year. And we're a large source of in-migration to Vermont. Because of aging and a number of other factors, Vermont would have negative population like most of New England. But the University of Vermont contributes the largest segment of incoming population to the state. And it's part of that sort of recognition of the role that we play as the lifeline for Vermont in a very straightforward demographic sense that we started thinking about the 4GU scenario. So what is it that we're really trying to solve? Well, when we look around at potential partners in a situation where population is declining, we're increasingly dependent on out-of-state students, the state is small and provides very little public funding for the university, we note a couple of things. Industry, when they generally look to university, usually think about us in two kinds of ways. They think about us as sources of workforce, and sometimes as sources of IP. And those are both things that are really true, but it's less true in terms of a place like University of Vermont than it is like a place like MIT. In fact, at MIT, industry partners will line up and pay hefty fees just to get access to faculty and graduate students and so on. Something that we would love to think we could do in Vermont, but it's just not feasible. We'll have a gold partner level or a silver partner level for recruitment and some of those things, but it pales in comparison to the big tech schools. Communities, on the other hand, often lack expertise and could really benefit from access to the university, but often don't have the financial resources or the understanding of what goes on behind university walls to really make the case for that. We all talk about being open and accessible, but in terms of actually having broad public understanding of what we do, what kinds of resources we have, the ways we're willing to collaborate, these are often really problematic. And then, of course, folks who are in my position as in the research administration area will bring opportunities into our labs and our faculty sources. And the first response from most of our faculty is that to look at potential partnerships as in terms of the things that they know well, which is NIH or NSF funding. And so they look at these as funding sources, which is not how the folks like industry or communities coming into the university see themselves. And so you have this tremendous mismatch on all sides. So is there a different way to align these interests and needs? My case is that universities like the University of Vermont have ways of providing partnership that probably go beyond the ways that most people outside of the university think about us. My case usually is to point out that the University of Vermont is more important to the state of Vermont than MIT is to Massachusetts, and that's why we have a very close relationship with the governor, with the senators, and have really direct access to policy shaping and policy funding sources that are beyond the reach of many universities that are seemingly much better resourced and better off. We also have a tremendous philanthropic base, as do most higher educations. We are the kind of place that folks like to give money to for scholarships or for research or for things like that. And so our ability to access funding outside of ordinary channels in philanthropic and in government circles is a huge advantage, and one that should be shaping our relationship with communities and corporations. And then the final piece that we pay a lot of attention to is the fact that we spend a disproportionate amount of money compared to the municipalities around us. A large university like us, but even a large university in a much more prosperous urban area like Pitt or Carnegie Mellon, those are enormous budgets that often go well beyond the entire municipalities in which they're embedded. And so the question is, how do we use these kinds of things to really change our relationship with those outside folks? How do you leverage these other university assets for communities and companies and really try and change that conversation? Well, we started this process about 5 years ago when we opened the Office of Engagement. And one of the first things we did was really try to look at our research and engagement portfolio ongoing to figure out where were we already active and what kinds of projects were we already doing. A broad scale map of the state and all of the places where you're working really helped us think about ourselves as having relationships in place that we could build on to change the view of the folks around us in the kind of ways that we're talking about. In order to support that, we created a new model of collaboration. We took designated funding from various sources, federal and otherwise, and created the Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships. This is an engagement platform that allows us to reach a lot of folks, but it also is a funding platform for a grant program that specifically funds projects that have to have an inside component from UVM and have to have an outside component and some kind of real tangible kind of goal. These can be something like an economic development group, it can be a municipality, it can be a for-profit corporation, it can be a non-profit corporation, and it can involve faculty and staff from across any part of our university. The Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships puts these two together and funds the projects up to $200,000 or $300,000 a year to try and get things off the ground. And so far, we've put about $6.2 million over the last 3 years in partnerships whose real goal is just to erase the boundary between the university and the communities and to get more people to think about ways they can leverage the incredible capacity that we have on campus. And the second piece I would advise is to find partners that are already invested. So we began a broad outreach with our local utilities at the same time that we were building up a grid study group and building out infrastructure at UVM in areas around next generation grid technology. So this is an ongoing project with our partners from Velco, looking at load curves and large scale sort of simulation management. These are digital twin projects, if you've heard of those before, but they are digital twins that we're building in collaboration with the actual companies whose data we're working on. And that's people like VEIC, which was now a national company out of Vermont, but it's also our grid utility and a number of the local energy companies. And this sort of collaborative work on digital twins has allowed us to really invest in on-campus infrastructure and scholarships and other kinds of things that really has utility to the companies, and therefore they're working with us on, we have spare equipment that is no longer useful in utility space, or things that they've tried that didn't work that they give to us to see if we can get working. You can see we built a large solar field, we have batteries and an electrolyzer, a real-time grid simulation. And this was all done directly with community partners as co-creators of the lab. The third thing I would say is how, again, going back, how can you use philanthropy and shared interest to try and lift up some of the research projects that we knew we wanted to invest in? And so we knew we needed high performance computing and wanted to invest in that in the digital age. We reached out for collaborations on ways that we could use machine learning around health to some of our alumni located potential corporate partners, and created a project with MassMutual where they were very interested in biosensors and ways that insurance companies can collect data. And we were very interested in ways that you could use advanced machine learning. And so what that resulted in is new high performance computing, a project built around Aura rings with our students that produced an inordinate number of participants and faculty participants, graduate students, and theses. And it created IP that we share with MassMutual for their algorithmic work inside of their actuarial processes. We also can access government, as I mentioned before, to create large projects. This was our Tech Hub project, which we have a large semiconductor fab near UVM. It's old and complicated, but they have been reinventing themselves in the area of wide bandgap semiconductor work. And we are working with them to create a regional tech hub. And this was a project that required getting buy-in from the state of Vermont. It got buy-in from the Department of Defense and corporate partners, including Global Foundries, Cadence, Keysight, RTX for some of our market pull. And we really focused there on how do we collectively build out an ecosystem that allowed these projects to happen in Vermont. If the state was willing to put up the conditions for development, UVM, because of our size, could be the coordinator and bring those things together. We also wanted to be aware of really what was going on in our communities. Vermont had a series of devastating floods over 2024 and 2025. And so we have a lot of water researchers that got together and sort of reached out to create a collaborative set of research projects across the state, employing students and graduate students, our faculty, and created our new Water Resources Institute around a set of projects aimed at really working with local governments, bringing in small businesses into the equation, and really dealing one-to-one with area residents. And of course, if you're going to do that, you're bringing in a large multidisciplinary team. There are sociologists, there are hydrologists, there are political scientists all working together. And this was really a kind of campus-wide interdisciplinarity that was not interdisciplinarity just for its own sake, but rather for the purpose of meaningful engagement outside of the university. And then finally, we tried to play to our strengths. We have a large medical school, so we created a wet lab incubator. This was a real interest to our community, but it's also one of those things that's in terms of regulatory space, extremely difficult to do. The university has special capacity in that way. We have the trust of the state. We have operational systems to deal with wet lab infrastructure. And so we were able to put together a large wet lab bioincubator for folks around the Burlington ecosystem in the life sciences much more easily and much more quickly and much more cheaply than any kind of private outside group could do. And as a result of that, all of the local venture groups and all of the local co-working spaces have gotten together to really support that area and push business into the incubator, which has been a great collaborative community enterprise. Finally, what do you have to do about all this? You have to tell your story loud and proud. So Vermonters are not very good at that. So we started a large economic development conference where we got folks together to talk about community needs, business opportunities, our startup ecosystem. And again, because this was not happening at scale in a place as small as Vermont, the university could provide a venue that was really outsized for the state and bring in a tremendous number of people who could really engage the audience and really point to some new directions. So every year, the RISE Summit now brings in about 800 people to our campus. It's the main economic development conference in all of Vermont. And that's really just driven by the fact that we have the scale at UVM to do that kind of work and support those kinds of efforts. So in addition to telling your story, track your impacts and really frame them in terms of the ways that they're affecting the community. So we, at this point, have roughly 2,100 people employed on the basis of the $280 million that we spend. The federal investment alone in Vermont creates $230 million in economic output, and we point out that of the $180 million in federal dollars that come into the state for research, we actually give $22 million of it back in taxes. So by framing our outcomes in terms of the impacts on the community, we continue to make that sort of connected, engaged, broader than land grant aim of ours right in front and center of how we're talking about these things. Finally, I won't have time to show this video, but it's online. If you look up ARC at UVM, let the students lead the way. This is our student incubator. Students actually work on university IP and work with faculty and for faculty and in place of faculty in commercializing university technologies. We've had 3 major efforts spin out of this. One of them, Verdi Technology, won the Green Tech Open for the region and placed as the People's Choice nationally. And these are student-driven projects competing in open startup competitions, not in the student startup division. And this was a project created by the students. It was their idea, and it's student-run and driven. And really, our job entirely is to put them in touch with the technologies, create the curriculum around which they're going to frame their efforts, and then get out of their way. Because the students are ready to engage the world almost from the day they get here, not just when they're ready to leave. So what are we hoping to gain with the 4GU project? I think a big part of our hope is ways that we can think more clearly about how this work that we're doing outside integrates with the classic academic mission and how we need to rechange and evolve that academic mission to fit better with this vision. I think the other thing is we need to be able to have a much better and clearer understanding of our impacts. I showed you a few examples of what we've done here, but realistically, we know that we're just scratching the surface. And so with our partners at Elsevier, we really feel like there's an opportunity to measure the compound impacts of what a university can be in a community in new and different kinds of ways. And so that's the end of this discussion about how we're trying to create a 4GU in Vermont. The need for us is clear. Another photo from 2025. And I think this is a project that we're in because we have to be, and because we want to be, and because we really value the state that we're in. So thank you very much for your time. And again, apologies that I can't be there in person. I wish I could. Signing off here and hoping everyone has had a great conference.
So thank you, Kirk. And again, Kirk is, sorry he couldn't be there. Glad he told his story loud and proud. If there's any questions for him, I'm very happy to connect you. He's agreed that that's all right. So hopefully from Kirk's example, you're starting to see what this looks like in practice. And perhaps you're thinking, this is something I'd like to explore further. And that's exactly where the 4GU community comes in. Now, the community, I like to say, comes intentionally from a place of yes. If the model resonates with you, if you're curious, or if you're even at the early stages of thinking about your role in regional ecosystems, you're very, very welcome to join. You don't need to be an already fully realized fourth generation university. Many of our members are exploring what this means in their own context and learning and shaping it as they go. And most importantly, probably, is that it is free to join. It's really about building a community, a global community of practice where universities can connect, learn from each other, and develop together. Universities who our leadership aspires to be a fourth generation university or already is. That's the university membership, which is research institutions who issue PhDs and publish more than 500 articles indexed in Scopus. But alongside university membership, there's also an option to join as a professional member. So that's for individuals who may not represent an institution at a leadership level or working in other parts, but are still actively involved or interested in developing innovation ecosystems and engaging with this work. And then for other universities, we have the concept of being aligned with 4GU, which I'll talk about shortly. There's several practical benefits to join the 4GU community. Again, we're building that 4GU community of practice. This is about peer learning and accelerating that progress through a community practice where you can learn from each other along the way, build collaborations with like-minded institutions, and also develop the 4GU indicators to better understand and connect strategy to impact and communicate that effectively. Now, we recognize that ecosystems can be different across the globe, and this is not just limited to technical universities. There's civic universities, medical universities. The model is inclusive, and each member really adds unique experiences, and that's meant to keep that diversity of universities. So part of the goals of the board is to help universities assess where they are on that 4GU journey. And as such, Elsevier has helped build the 4GU alignment application. This is hot off the press. We've just launched this week, where universities can be recognized for their 4GU-ness, so to speak. It's a reflective alignment process. It's not a ranking or a competition. And again, there's no cost to go through this application process. Universities share how their strategy, partnerships, and activities align with the 4GU concept, which is reviewed by the community board, providing a peer-endorsed recognition. And it's about helping institutions really articulate and gain that external validation. And through this process, you become certified a little bit, showing that you're aligned as a fourth generation university. We'll give you a badge that you can use on your marketing materials. And more importantly, we give you an opportunity to showcase your university as well. Now, alongside that, Elsevier wanted to also develop ways to help universities advance their thinking around an ecosystem. Around many parts of the world, this is a new idea. So as a result, we have developed some products and services as well. So there's the consultancy service. For others, you may have your defined ecosystem, but you want to do a bit of a health check. There is indeed a place to look at those quantitative and qualitative functionalities with the alignment report and tool as well. So those are also launching this week, so I'm happy to talk to you. And there's a couple of my colleagues here, Tina and Mohammed, who are also happy to talk to you a little bit more. Everything we've talked about today, the community examples, is really just about one thing. It's about helping universities better understand, demonstrate, and strengthen their real-world impact. If this resonates with you, the easiest next step is to join the Forge U community. Again, it's free, and it's designed to be a space where we learn from each other and shape this together. You can sign up at 4th Gen University, or feel free to reach out to me directly, scan the QR code, etc. Thank you so much for your time. I hope it's given you a useful lens on where universities are headed, and hopefully how you may be part of that journey as well. So, and just a little image from last night. Thank you, from the drone show that I definitely put on. Thanks.